quality of a Fire Emblem map can be separated into 5 different factors. Flavor, how well the map matches the story and atmosphere that it is trying to portray, and whether or not it succeeds at making you feel like you're really experiencing the story as the developers intended. Objective, what the map is asking you to do in order to finish the chapter, be it seizing, routing, escaping, or defending. Is it offering you an objective that is interesting to work towards? Replayability, you finished the chapter, now how do you feel about it? Frustrated? Relieved? Satisfied? There's any number of possible outcomes that can occur after finishing a chapter, so consider whether or not you'd enjoy playing the chapter again on a subsequent playthrough. Difficulty. Difficulty might not be an important factor for everyone, but a fair amount of players yearn to be challenged by Fire Emblem, to be given a puzzle to solve with the resources provided. Was the map that you just finished difficult in a compelling way? Enjoyability. Plain and simple, is the map fun to play? Are you having a good time whilst playing it, and if so, are you able to articulate exactly why the map is so stimulating? When all of these variables are managed effectively, what you're left with is an incredibly satisfying chapter to play through, providing a memorable experience for the player that they'll hopefully be excited to enjoy again during a second playthrough. And if you don't pay attention to this formula, what you're given is some of the worst the series has to offer. My name's Blute. Welcome to F.O.R.D.E. And welcome back to another episode of F.O.R.D.E, returning once more into the cold, gnarly embrace of FE7. A game I'll continue to ridicule until the end of time. Although probably not today, since we're doing a map I actually somewhat like. You probably already know which chapter we'll be skimming through today, since you're a big brainiac and solved my anagram of Elven Swore, which rather effortlessly turns into New Resolve. AKA Chapter 21 of Hector Hard Mode, or 20 from Eliwood Mode, because FE7's chapter structure is a massive fucking mess. My hands are on my head while I'm saying this, just want to really exasperate the point there. Anyway, I didn't last long on the not making fun of FE7 front, so let's just go ahead and dive right into the categories, shall we? Starting off with flavor. Flavor's a bit of a mixed bag this time around, but from the outset, I want to say it's more positive than negative, so to say. For starters, the general theme that the devs are trying to portray with this chapter is a feeling of sorrow being broken by the New Resolve, hence the title, because, you know, it's the fucking title of the map. Anyway, Eliwood's papa has just succumbed to the old Fire Emblem tradition of, if you're the parent of the main character and your name doesn't rhyme with Eligood, then promptly enter this coffin. And the gang's basically at their lowest point in the story. Until the next lowest point where Eliwood decides that he doesn't want the sponsor from baddragon.com. That's relevant. It's okay. Anyway, pretty simple stuff that's presented reasonably well in the story through music and such. I don't have any problems with how, like, the overall mood of the chapter is presented through the dialogue and such. In terms of gameplay, there's some good and some bad, and I want to keep saying good things about New Resolve because it's a chapter I rather like, so let's just get the bad out of the way first. The big gameplay reveal for this chapter is Ninian finally joining the list of playable units in the form of your dancer, which should act as a very, triumphant moment in the story, since she's been more of, a plot device up to this point, rather than an actual character. It should evoke the feeling of casting aside your shackles and, following your heart to do what's right. But it kinda doesn't work, in my opinion. Ninian is a dancer, and as such will need to be treated as incredibly fragile, since if she enters combat, she'll die. It's pretty much as simple as that. If she sees the enemy coming towards her with any type of weapon, even a butter knife, she'll fall over. This really hinders the whole breaking your chains vibe when you're bursting out of your prison cell to aid your love interest, only to basically cower in the back line. Because it's a Fog of War chapter with a bunch of flies, meaning I can't position you aggressively, as you'll just get one-shot by one of the numerous Wyvern and Pegasus Knights. I understand what they were going for, and the spirit of it is there, and it works somewhat well. I get what they were going for, how it works with the music and Ninian finally rushing to Eliwood's aid. It's a rather satisfying moment, but because Ninian is so frail, I'd say the moment you actually get into the moment-to-moment gameplay, it can make the message seem a little bit awkward and stilted. However, on the positive side, I just want to say that I love the fact that New Resolve takes place at night. Might seem kind of simple since, yeah, we've had other chapters that take place at night at this point, the Peddler Merlinus takes place at night, and I'm sure there's others that I can't remember off the top of my head. But it works especially well here since this is acting literally as the darkest point for our characters up to this point, before they gain their new resolve. Like, again, this may seem like really basic and kind of cookie cutter, for lack of a better word, but in my opinion, that's kind of FE7. FE7? This is kind of FE7 shtick. Like, FE7 is a very paint-by-numbers game. It is literally called Fire Emblem. Like, it is the only game in the series that nobody really calls by its subtitle. One, because it wasn't localized, mainly, but also because, like, FE7 is the most Fire Emblem of Fire Emblems. There's a big, like, dragon at the end, there's a big evil sorcerer, there's a fucking lord, like, it's got all of, like, the usual trappings. So the fact that New Resolve follows, like, this very atypical, like, hero's journey plot, almost, and New Resolve acts as the pitch black night before the new dawn, so to say. Like, it's good stuff. It's cheesy, but I actually really like it. Yeah, the stuff with Ninian is kind of mixed, but I do genuinely like the aesthetic for the chapter with a Fog of War night map. And I want to say I'm willing to overlook the fact that you could probably fix Ninian's issues by just improving her bases, like, ever so slightly. Just like a couple of points of bulk here and there. And upon saying that, I'm realizing that her bases will literally mirror Nils's bases if you play Lin mode, and oh god, the FE7 can of worms is beginning to crack open, so I'm just gonna give Flavor a success before I start yapping about FE7's problems some more. Which will move us right onto Objective. Objective is really nice and simple with this one, but I honestly really appreciate how effectively it's done with not that much effort. Main objective is a simple defeat boss, but thanks to the addition of Fog of War, there's this added air of mystery. Now that might sound like a little juvenile when I say it like that, because, like, well, I could just go and look where the boss is on, like, WoD or Wiki. But, think about it like this. On your average defeat boss map, you'll usually be able to see the boss and the overall size of the map that you're wading through, basically allowing you to determine how long the map will take based on the distance between your units, the boss, as well as all of the red jobbers just looking to die in between. However, New Resolve has hidden the majority of its enemies, including the boss, meaning that there's no real way to tell the strength of the enemy nor how long the map will take from the outset without any outside information. I'm just gonna go ahead and, like, assume you're not looking at WoD or either of the Fire Emblem wikis when you play this chapter, because it kind of, like, ruins the whole thing. It might not seem like much, but I think it adds a lot to an otherwise simple main objective. Also, a little side note, I think it's really, really good to add a stealable item to the boss, Oleg, in the form of a hero crest, adding this extra layer of slowly advancing through the fog, so as to not murder the boss by accident. Stealables are always a great addition, although you could make the argument that on your first playthrough you're not going to know the boss is going to have said stealable, so you might not, like, bring a thief, like it's a Fog of War. It's good stuff, it's good stuff for replayability. Maybe I should have added it in there. Whatever, it's fine. As for side objectives, yeah, no real complaints here. Either plenty of villages to visit, with some of them offering items that are very much appreciated, such as the Elysian Whip in the top right, which I want to say is the first Elysian Whip you can get, maybe outside of secret shops. Like I said in a previous video, I also love the fact that I can't remember which one it is at this point. It's always good to have your most valuable items be the most difficult to acquire, and vice versa, so making the village that is, like, directly next to you at spawn a kind of a basic booty item, like a light rune or an elixir, that's good. But making the village that is furthest away from you, that is most likely to be destroyed by brigands, making it something worth striving towards, is basically, like, always a good thing. It gives the player some, like, genuinely good motivation to play aggressively. Now, I'll admit, it can be a little bit frustrating to not know how much time you have to make it to those villages, since the Fog of War will obviously shield the brigands from Mark's ever-present gaze as he looms across the battlefield. But part of me kind of likes the chapter forces you to play blindly aggressive in order to make it there in time. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit masochistic. As we've established, I enjoy some masochistic mechanics. And we'll get more into that when we make it to difficulty. But I think the Fog of War on this map is mostly fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this category a success. I think Objective is great here. Really fun, sprawling village-type map with plenty of rewards, and a slightly twist on a familiar objective. No notes, A rank, done. And we make it to replayability. As always, I feel as though replayability is going to be the category that's probably the most difficult to succeed at. Actually, I'll just establish this. I feel like I consider this a lot when I'm writing notes for all of these chapters. When I made these categories, I really underestimated just how static a lot of FE maps can end up being. So the majority of the maps we've covered so far have ended up failing at replayability, because I consider the bar to be, like, relatively high. And honestly, I think that's fine. I think it's actually kind of neat that we have a category that is genuinely difficult to succeed at. Maybe one day I'll implement an actual rating system rather than just a big old like X or a big old tick. But either way, in regards to New Resolve's replayability, I do think there's a reasonable amount of variance in this chapter, showing up in a couple of different ways. As per usual, there's a standard stuff of difficulty and units likely being altered on subsequent playthroughs. Then there's also the fact that this chapter will have two, like, slight variations in the form of Eliwood and Hector mode, with the main difference between them being the unit types and positions. For example, Eliwood mode will utilize, like, pretty standard unit types like Cavs and Armor whereas Hector mode will opt to replace these units with the more often encountered Pegasus Knights and Wyvern Knights, because I think everyone's headcanon for Hector mode is him retelling the story but making it sound as stupid as possible. There's a surprisingly high amount of differences in this chapter alone, just based on who your main lord is, so I'll give the chapter some credit for that. And finally, I would just like to comment on Fog of War before we do a further dive in difficulty, and just say that I know a lot of people really don't like Fog of War and just completely write it off as a bad mechanic, regardless of how it's implemented. They think it's an unfair mechanic since the AI isn't affected by it and it encourages defensive gameplay for the most part, which is kind of boring. I think that second part has more weight than the first one. I think, first of all, of course the AI isn't affected by Fog of War. They're AI. They're dumb. The AI is going to make scripted decisions because they're stupid. You can predict what they're going to do. Half of Fire Emblem is just luring out the enemy with your stronger blue units. Of course they need an advantage. You're not stupid and they are. Second of all, in this chapter, not only does Fog of War support mostly aggressive play, since you want to make it to the villages as quickly as possible, it also improves the overall replayability, since Fog of War will kind of like prevent you from remembering the enemy layout on a second playthrough. Meaning that every time you play through New Resolve, you're gonna keep having those moments of, oh yeah, that's right, there's Pegasus Knights, or oh yeah, there's Poison Lance, Wyvern Knights coming down towards me, or like, oh yeah, monks are like a garbage enemy type, and so on and so forth, just stuff like that. It's minor, but I actually think it really helps the replayability of the chapter, to the point where I think I'm gonna give the category a pass, surprisingly enough. Maybe not the strongest pass, but I think there's enough here to where I'm satisfied, and like, I legitimately enjoy replaying through this chapter. Now, difficulty. Maybe I lied when I said replayability would probably be the toughest category, because, oh man, we're really close to getting a perfect chapter, but difficulty is just, I'm not entirely sure it's all there. So let's just start by addressing that big old grey lump with a trunk in the room. Fog of War! As I said, no, I don't think Fog of War is an irredeemable mechanic. I think there are plenty of maps with Fog of War that are good and only enhanced by the inclusion of reduced vision. It gives unit types more utility, such as tanks and thieves, and can do wonders for flavor. That being said, there's also a good chunk of maps in the series that are absolutely obliterated by being unable to see where the fuck you're going. Off the top of my head, Chapter 4 Gaiden of Thrashia, I forget what it's called, the chapter after the dungeon, obviously Chapter 4 Gaiden is after Chapter 4, shocker. But 4 Gaiden of Thrashia is a perfectly fine chapter that is only difficult because the enemies basically always get the first turn. Like, because of how Fog of War works in Thrashia, you literally can't see the enemies despite the fact that they are directly in front of you, which doesn't feel very interactive or fun to play against. As for New Resolve, I don't think Fog of War is an issue. If you told me that I'd be saying this about a chapter that features numerous flyers just swooping in and out of the fog to potentially one-shot one of your more fragile units, I'd call you a lunatic. But I think a lot of people forget that these menacing flyers, these absolute, like, hellions in the sky, they're not actually that dangerous, because, as I stated, the majority of them are wielding poison lances. This means that they're not actually capable of dealing that much damage, since they're effectively just using worse iron lances. I want to say the poison lance is just the iron lance, but I think one less might, and more importantly, way less hit. So your weaker units most likely aren't even going to be in that much danger to begin with. Outside of the usual question whenever you play Fire Emblem and you get poisoned, and it's like, oh fuck, can you die from poison in this game? Which I'm pretty sure every single person says when they play Fire Emblem. And to answer, viewer, I have no idea if you can die from poison in FE7. Please comment now! Because I also don't know and I'm too lazy to look it up. Now that I think about it, you'd probably think that I'd give difficulty a fail because it's flyers in Fog of War. But I'm actually going to give difficulty a fail because I don't think the chapter is actually quite hard enough. Which is a really weird thing to say. This isn't me being masochistic, it's more just criticizing the fact that half of the enemy units that remain the same regardless of which route you're on is made up of FE7 monks. If you're unfamiliar, FE7 monks are arguably like the weakest non-soldier, non-zombie unit in the entire franchise. They do no damage, they are made of wet tissue paper, and they will double nothing. I fucking hate facing monks. Because they are, like I said, they're effectively just like Sacred Stone zombies with 1 to 2 range. They're just irritating. They accomplish nothing and just make me wish I was fighting something like nomads or mages. Oh, this category is so close to being a success. It's like a D+, it's so close to a C-, that's almost a fucking success. But I just don't think there's that much challenge in the enemies themselves. Like, the objective is challenging, there's Fog of War, which can be tough. It's tough to get the thief over to the boss. There's a lot of things that are good, but I hate monks, man. That's so bad for enemies. Oh, it doesn't quite make it. Yeah, no, it's a failure. It's really close to succeeding, but I'm just gonna give it a failure. Take it up with the monks. And now we move on to enjoyability. I mean, it's pretty clear that I've been showering this chapter with praise and adoration up to this point, so I'm not gonna waste much time here. Enjoyability is going to be a success, because I think this chapter it kind of has something to offer, like, any type of player, when you think about it. Like, your more casual player who's just more interested in the story and, like, seeing how the plot progresses and just enjoying watching Rebecca's numbers go up. They have plenty to go on in this chapter. You can bring weaker units and they won't have that much of a disadvantage, and there is plenty of story to go around. The intermediate player will find challenge in trying to navigate through the Fog of War, and the guy who really needs to play other games will enjoy the fact that he's playing one of the chapters in FE7 that isn't total garbage. Are you proud of me, guys? I almost made it through the entire video without mocking FE7. Genuinely though, like, I enjoy the Fog of War, I enjoy how it handles its story beats with Ninian finally, like, following her feelings, and I enjoy trying to maneuver my Legault all the way to the boss so I can get an extra hero crest. It's just a fundamentally, like, well-made chapter. And that is going to wrap it up for this week's episode. I'll be completely honest, going into New Resolve, I expected to not enjoy it as much as I did. But instead, I ended up with a situation that's like kind of the opposite of how Port of Baden went. Where there, I actually did expect to enjoy it, and I came out kind of like, didn't age as well. Whereas this was the opposite. I was pleasantly surprised at how fair the Fog of War was, and how naturally it handled its introduction of Ninian. So New Resolve has reaffirmed my belief that FE7's mid-game is legitimately really well made, and that the other periods of the game should definitely take notes. Now, for our anagram, we could be going anywhere, dear viewer, so pay close attention as I continue the Theatre Kid act for another 10 to 20 seconds. So, our anagram for next week is indeed Raggy Hero Feces. F. Yeah, I know I'm using a single letter, and that's kind of a faux pas with anagrams, but Raggy Hero Feces was just too good to use. So that's the anagram. Again, for those in the back, Raggy Hero Feces. F. Just slap an extra F into the anagram solver that I'm sure you guys will use. I use it, I don't care. Anyway, that will wrap it up for this week. I hope you all have a wonderful time with your incredibly invigorating lives. And I will catch you guys next week for another delightful chapter. Have a great time, guys. I will see you next week.